Namaste Bharat. Hello India. This is me Preeti Chaudhary, your host for another episode of VC Spotlight by Preeti Chaudhary, featuring Osborne Saldanha, Xiaomi India. Concept, curation, and host is right here, me Preeti Chaudhary. This effort is to humanize the person from behind their VC profile. It is all about conversations on a one to one level, a heart to heart level, in terms of what makes this particular person tick, what are their views on the startup ecosystem from their personal and professional perspectives. So, without further ado, let us kickstart the afternoon. Once again, a very warm welcome to one and all that have tuned in today to this edition of VC Spotlight by Preeti Chaudhary with my guest and dear friend Osborne Saldanha of Xiaomi India. Let me bring him up into the stream. And here we go. Hello, Osborne. How are you this afternoon? Hi, Osborne. How are you this afternoon? Osborne? Osborne, can you hear me? Osborne, can you hear me? Osborne, can you hear me? Can you help me removing the headset probably? Maybe it will work better that way. Remove the headset. Osborne, can you hear me?
No, I can't hear you actually.
Okay, so you know what? Just remove the headset. Remove your headset. Osborne, can you hear me? So, all right, while we are waiting for Osborne to get sorted with that technical glitch, and these are the mod cons of working from home, which is absolutely all right because it is understandable that gadgets work, gadgets don't work, and as resilient human beings, it is our job to make sure that we make each and every situation work. So let me sort of talk a little bit more about this initiative of VC Spotlight. The whole idea here is to, like I said, bring the spotlight on VCs, on human beings that have chosen this field to be enablers for the ecosystem and help us in sort of understanding the nuances of how ventures work, how venture funding works. And in that light, today my guest here is my dear friend Osborne, who is looking after the investment side, the corporate investment side rather, of Xiaomi India. Once again, welcome to VC Spotlight by Preeti Chaudhary. Osborne, how are you this afternoon?
Hi, Preeti. Am I audible and everything now? I'm so sorry about that.
No, don't worry. It is absolutely perfectly all right. As humans, we make the best of all kinds of situations. So, absolutely, totally understandable. But how are you this afternoon, Osborne?
Doing well. Quite excited about this interview today. Thank you so much for having me over here. Been good.
Okay, great. You know what? This is all about a dialogue, a conversation from me to you, and hopefully there will be some questions and comments from the audience as well. At this point, I would like to take the time to reflect and advise the audience that this is a dialogue and a conversation. We will not be here if you are not there. So, everybody that's tuned in today, please make sure that you write your questions and comments into the comment section of this LinkedIn Live VC Spotlight featuring Osborne Saldana with me here, Preeti Chaudhary. So, just to put a context to this whole conversation, Osborne, tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you're from, and your education, your background, to who all are there in the family, and those kind of basic nitty gritties, so that we can get the human from behind this VC persona that is there. Over to you. Thank you.
Well, thanks for that. Well, about me, I'm a computer science graduate. I've learned about technology all my life, and it's been interesting. From engineering to doing investments and financial services and things like that has been quite a journey. It's been fun and interesting. I have been in venture capital or investing for all my professional life, so it's been fun. My growth trajectory has been fairly steep, and that's exactly what I wanted in my life. I never planned to become a venture capitalist or an investor in any form. But when I sort of graduated from college, I wanted to start up on my own. But being a computer science graduate, I didn't really know the finance aspect of it or what goes into starting up and things like that. I wanted to get onto the venture capital side or the investment side, learn about that, do it for some time, and then get to startups.
Fair enough. I think it's always about preparation and how to go about things, a little bit of research. It never goes wrong, really.
Yeah.
So that brings me to my next sort of question. I know you touched a little bit about how you made your way into the world of venture, but would you want to elaborate and tell us a little bit more exactly how did you sort of go about that? What was the thought process? What were you thinking? Here you are, a computer science graduate who could have, like you said, started off on your own and stuff like that. But why not that? Why this? Help us understand, please.
When I joined venture capital and the fund that I was with earlier back in Bombay, they were fairly uh, kind and trustworthy enough to think that I would be able to do this, being from technology background. So they gave me the freedom to be able to do what I wanted to within the framework of the fund, and I'm forever grateful for that. That in a sense gave me the stepping stone to be able to figure out what I really liked and what I wanted to do while in venture capital. So I did that, and I really started liking what I was doing at venture. Right. So because I really enjoyed what I was doing, it was challenging enough. I'd never done stuff like that in the past. Challenge is something that always gets me going, and it's something that I'm always yearning for in any role that I do, which is why then I stuck onto it. There were times when I did feel that I should get back in and become an entrepreneur, startup, and things like that. But I just loved the challenge of venture capital and investing and backing founders and things like that. I really loved all of that, which is why then I stuck on to doing those things. And to date, I continue to love what I'm doing, which is why I'm still in investments.
So then again, it is about having your heart in the right kind of place, So essentially,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit more about the corporate side of funding. You worked with a venture, sort of a traditional venture capital fund, and now you're at Xiaomi India looking after the corporate side of investments into all scheme of things. So tell us a bit more about the kind of scope, size, sector, and the target market that Xiaomi India or Xiaomi Global looks at, and what do you end up doing on a day-to-day basis right here, Osborne? Over to you.
So, well, from a difference between typical or traditional venture capital to a corporate venture capital, the main difference is that you have to look for synergistic investments or strategic investments, right? Whereas with a normal VC fund, you typically look for high growth startups that you can invest in. Uh, and that's primarily the main difference. Other than that, every single thing is looked at the same way as I would at a typical VC fund, right? Right from the way I'd evaluate a particular startup to the way I look at the founders or go about doing due diligence, everything is exactly the same. The main synergy bit is where it really differs, right? From a Xiaomi perspective, Xiaomi looks at investing typically in companies that are growth stage and that are synergistic to what we do as Xiaomi, right? And Xiaomi is a fairly large organization. We have a whole skew of various different products that we retail across the globe. And being able to find out the various synergies and strategies across each of those business verticals is something that adds to the various challenges that come with a typical venture investing, right? So primarily at Xiaomi, we look at growth stage and we look at synergistic investments. And by synergy, basically, I mean that we involve the business teams as well to figure out what they are doing, what is their strategic plan, all of those aspects as well that go into the whole process of figuring out investments, really.
So essentially, then to me, it sort of seems like it is a well crafted and well sort of researched and thought through process from all aspects of the business. Because you're involving the investment team, you're involving the business decision team, you're probably involving all the aspects of your current business which are relevant to the investment that you would want to make. Am I right in understanding that, Osborne?
Exactly, you're right, and that's really the benefits that come with partnering with a corporate VC, right? When you are looking at building a product, I mean, especially if you're looking at enterprise SaaS, for example, you look at who are your large enterprise partners that you can partner up with, right? And Xiaomi, being an existing player in the market, can really partner up and build you to scale, right? So that's the benefit that comes with a large organization like Xiaomi. The other benefit that comes with partnering with a corporate VC really is the fact that you can speak to virtually anyone from the organization, whether it is with regard to logistics, ops, business, communications, PR, whatever those functions are, you can have direct access to them and at scale, right? So there are, I mean, for example, at Xiaomi, we're a fairly large organization in India, and getting access to people from the organization, understanding how they do various aspects of it, all of that comes a little bit easier with a corporate VC as opposed to a typical VC fund. So those are a lot of the benefits that come with partnering or a corporate VC really investing in one of these startups.
Sure. And could you tell me a little bit more about the scope, size, and the target market that Xiaomi looks at for this particular? Have you set aside a certain amount of fund for this purpose, or have you made an SPV, or what exactly have you done about this, Osborne?
So there's no particular fund size because it's a prop fund in a sense. The amount we can invest really depends on the kind of opportunities that we come across. Even the size of investments that we will look at, we can look at anywhere from 1 to 2 million US dollars to 100 odd million US dollars. It really depends on the size of the company at that point, how synergistic the company is to Xiaomi, and at the same time the capital requirements from the company. That it doesn't make any sense to be able to put in a large pool of capital, but the company doesn't really require it in a sense. So those are the various things that we look at when we are
Mm-hmm.
investing in companies.
Sure. And you are looking at the European market, the Southeast Asian market, and obviously we are all in India, so we see the and know the ecosystem here. Tell us a little bit more about in terms of any comparisons, anything that stand out from, say, the European or the Southeast Asian market vis-a-vis our Indian startup ecosystem. What are your thoughts on if you were to compare all three of them, say, together? What are the pros and what are the cons of either or each of those? Up to you.
Sure. Yeah, no, thanks for reminding me that we do look at investments in Southeast Asia and Europe as well, in addition to India. But at the same time, I mean, it's unfair to compare these various markets. But broadly, from what I've been sort of evaluating, and whenever I'm speaking with other founders in these different markets, what I've realized is that, at least in Southeast Asia, uh, this is sort of my understanding of it, but let's say in a market like Indonesia, I find the Indonesian market 3 to 4 years behind India in terms of tech adoption, right? In some ways, we're sort of time traveling back to 3 4 years back when we go to Indonesia, but that also comes across with a lot of opportunities. And another thing that I've also noticed is that a lot of Indian founders are now going to Southeast Asia, primarily in Indonesia and Vietnam, and they're starting up over there, right? Similar business models that have been there in India are starting up in Indonesia, for example, but with the twist of the local flavor over there. So that's what I've been seeing, at least in Southeast Asia. Vietnam is another very interesting market where there is a very highly skilled sort of labor force over there. So it's interesting a market from that perspective. Philippines as well. It's primarily video driven market, so there's a lot of content related startups that you can sort of find out over there. That's a very interesting market in itself, right? When I look at Europe, Europe as well is fairly advanced compared to India. And when I say fairly advanced, that is only when you look at certain markets. And to give you an example, fintech is a very advanced market in that region, right? Primarily because of the regulations, the fact that you can go to 32 different countries within the European Union. Those regulations really make sense, and it's favorable to be able to expand not just, let's say, in France, but you can go to Spain, Italy, etc., fairly easily compared to when you would do it anywhere else, right? So fintech is very advanced over there. Enterprise SaaS is very advanced in Europe. But then there are other segments which are not as advanced when you compare them to India, really. So there's a lot of these nuances with each of these markets. In some sectors, the markets are fairly advanced. In some sectors, they are not as advanced. But yeah, everyone's just trying to find the best way out and trying to find the best sort of startup that they can target for their particular citizens in the country.
Absolutely spot on over there, because I mean, each again, it's all about the culture as well of a particular place. Everything is dictated by a particular history, the lineage, the legacy, and so on and so forth. There's so many small nuances that actually play a very large role, how business is conducted, how people conduct themselves, and so on and things. So absolutely spot on with
Yeah.
that. That
Which
brings
is
me
why
to the
also
next.
actually
Yeah,
I'm sorry
yeah,
to
please.
cut you, but which is
No,
also
no.
why I think that you cannot just copy paste a business model from the US or even from China and bring them to India, for example. There are a lot of differences that the Indian consumer brings along with it that you have to be able to adopt and adapt to those various cultural differences that come about, and that's what creates a very unique business model for India.
Well, absolutely, and I would agree with you over there. Even within India, there are so many regional differences. No wonder we have, all these websites and all these short video making things coming out in vernac. Now, vernacular is going to be
Yeah,
the next big thing when it comes to serving the next billion people that are all sitting in the tier 2, 3, 4 Bharat. They're no more sitting in the tier 1 of the Bangalore's, of the Gurgaons, of the Bombays, and the what have yous. They're sitting in
yeah.
places like where I'm from, Jabalpur, from Jodhpur, Bhopal, Indore, say Chhattisgarh. And what do you do then? Then you have to adapt in Hindi, Bihari, Bhojpuri, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam,
Yeah.
Kannada. So it is so important to actually go as deep and as micro as one can, because therein I think lies the success. And you're right in bringing that out, Osborne. That brings me up to the next thing. So, what is the funding methodology and the process that one needs to sort of be mindful of when they are probably looking at Xiaomi for investing in their startup? Anything in particular sort of stand out? Any business philosophy that Xiaomi sort of lives by that they want to also then see in their investee sort of startups? Over to you.
I think from what we look for or what startups should really sort of target when they are looking to build is primarily how they are growing. The growth metrics, at least for us, when we are looking at growth related startups, right? Growth metrics really matter. And these metrics can be gamified and all of those aspects are there. But when you look at them sustainably, all these metrics, only the best sort of startups can really come out of those metrics really. And that's where we look for how sustainable are these growth metrics. When we look for another aspect that we look for is also unit economics. Obviously, unit economics is fairly important. And we understand that early on, the unit economics may be a little skewed or revenue might be a little low and things like that. But how do we demonstrably sort of identify whether these can be sustained at scale? So that is another aspect that's fairly important for us. Obviously, the integrity of the founder is extremely important. I mean, when we look at integrity, it's a fairly subjective term, but it's extremely important, and it comes across just through the conversations that we're having with founders, right? It comes across just how you explain a particular thing, your knowledge of a particular subject. Like as you are saying, a founder from Jabalpur, for example, how do they truly understand that consumer in Jabalpur or wherever else in India? Those are some of the things that are subjective, but also really matter when we are sort of evaluating these opportunities. The other thing is obviously whether the business is synergistic to Xiaomi. That also means that we involve our business teams to sort of speak with the founder and try to identify whether there is a real business case over here or not. More often than not, the company is usually working with us from the beginning, and that's where we identify whether we can also take a skin in the game, as they call it, right, and try to identify whether we can partner with them in that sense. So those are a few of the broad strokes of what we look for when we are looking at investing in these very startups.
Sure, absolutely. And those are very valid points. I mean, obviously, it is a business and not a charity after all, even though wherever money is involved, obviously it's got to sort of make 5x, 10x, or 20x, and then sort of return. So, absolutely spot on. The principles need to be very sort of fundamental and correct and spot on. So, thank you for sharing those. And that brings me to ask you this. What do you think is the number one priority of the business right now? And what do you think are the biggest accomplishments so far? And it could be anything, any tangible, intangible things from your perspective, your point of view. Osborne?
From my perspective, I think what are the tangible, or actually, what's the growth or what's the vision of the company going forward? At least from my perspective, I think it's with regard to providing the best consumer experience to the users at the best sort of price. And that's what Xiaomi has done all along. But now it needs to double down on just that strategy in a sense to be able to provide something like that. That from whenever I am interacting with my colleagues at Xiaomi, that thought process is always sort of shown that how do you provide the best product to these consumers? How do you create it as simple as they can so that the consumer has very little overhead to be able to use something like this? And that thought process comes down to the very lowest in the organization, which is very interesting to sort of look at. Obviously, it's also about growing the consumer base, and all of those aspects are there. Being number one globally, obviously, those ambitions will always be there for any organization, right? But yeah, at the core of all of that is providing the best consumer experience at the best possible price, which is fairly interesting for me to look at. Yeah.
And I think that trickles down right from Lei Jun to down to the maybe the watchman, because I mean, from what I know, and I've lived in China for about almost 7, 8 years, and I've seen it, the entrepreneurship and the enterprising nature of the people all around. And I think particularly when I
Yes.
speak of Lei Jun, he is of the thought that technology should not be prohibitively priced. The best of the technology can be prohibitively priced to reach a common man. So I think it's all a bottom down approach, really, and that seems to be working really well, which is great. And that brings me to the
Yeah.
next question, please. What is the number one priority of the business right now in terms of, say, funding, investments? Are you looking at a few deals from, say, in Europe or in Southeast Asia? What's going on right now, please?
So yeah, we continue to evaluate opportunities across Southeast Asia, India, Europe, etc. It's always fairly interesting to look at all of these opportunities. We continue to look at them. We have just started as of this year to look at these opportunities globally. So far, we've been investing primarily in India and China, a little bit in Indonesia as well in the past. But yeah, we're keen to develop those markets and hence be able to also invest in those markets.
Brilliant. Great. Um, what's the future vision? What, say, 6 months or 12 months or 24 months down the line? Anything specific in the pipeline or any strategizing that is happening at this moment? What's going on?
There are strategies, obviously. The main strategy is to be able to reach every sort of consumer across these markets. We've done decently well in markets of Europe recently. Quite a few of those markets have been really high growth for Xiaomi. The strategy is to be able to reach all of those customers really in the various markets that we are present in. Obviously, in India, we're doing decently well. It's now number one for the past 3 odd years and continuing to grow. Xiaomi has been developed into a really India homegrown sort of business that has been loved by Indians really. So that's going to be another important point for Xiaomi.
Okay, thank you, Osman. And a quick question that comes to my mind right now is, you from your own days of working with a traditional venture cap fund in Bombay to actually then now overseeing Southeast Asian, European, Indian market for scouting, rather, I would say, for investments for Xiaomi. Um, what is it that you sort of see the similarity in, say, the thought process or anything else that sort of jumps out from these three regions, particularly for you? Anything like that? And what is the kind of advice that you would want to give out to the founders in these markets who are looking at maybe approaching Xiaomi for their funding related needs? So it's a two-pronged question. First one being your observations of similarities, dissimilarities, and the second one, any advice to anybody looking at funding from Xiaomi. Over to you. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks. I think similarities wise, what I've noticed is that a lot of the founders across India, Southeast Asia, and Europe are extremely approachable in the sense that they are more than willing to talk about their business, whether it's for investments or not, really. But they're just very excited to talk about it and sort of see what it can lead to, in a sense, you know. So that excitement, enthusiasm, the openness and approachability, all of those aspects is fairly strong when you speak to all of these founders, which is a one thing that's sort of very interesting, and it sort of drives me as well to be able to speak to all of these founders. The sheer excitement that you see on a founder's face and their tone of voice and things like that is just very exciting and interesting, and it drives me to do what I do generally, right? So that's what is the most common thing that I find. In terms of advice for startups, really, I think no advice as such. A lot of founders are doing a lot of really good stuff out there, and when they're building stuff, it's primarily to build for consumers. As long as you are building for consumers and you are being used by these consumers, the business will get noticed by whichever investor that is out there, including from us or a Xiaomi generally. So that is the key thing. If specifically to a Xiaomi, I would say that it's important to look at growth really and see how you are targeting those various markets and how you are growing. If your growth is attractive, it's attractive and interesting for us to look at as well. Obviously, it's also important on the business model itself and how you are building out your unit economics, your distribution capability, all of those aspects. That is extremely important as well for us when we look at all of these things.
Okay, and you know what? You have been looking at the Indian ecosystem as well. What do you think is your overview in terms of what are we doing right, what are we not doing right? Because I mean, obviously, you and me will have different perspectives. So I would like to compare, my notes whether what I think is what you think as well, or is there a different perspective? Because it's always a learning journey. I could learn something new from you today. So what do you think of the Indian startup ecosystem from all aspects? From innovation, from funding, from successes, from failures, from the use cases, anything and everything really. Over to you.
I find it very interesting that the Indian entrepreneur is extremely innovative compared to a lot of the other regions that I've looked at, right? And you can call it that the fact that they're jugadu in a sense, or hustling and trying to figure out all of that stuff. But that innovation or that drive to innovate is really what is really prominent for Indian entrepreneurs, and that's really exciting to see. And the reason for that could also be the fact that there is circumstances that create all of these necessities for innovation, which is actually the most important superpower that Indian entrepreneurs have. We do not have existing rails on which to build, right? And by that I mean that we do not have existing telephone lines, we do not have existing roads and things like that, which is why we can create everything from scratch and with the most innovative approach, right? Which is why today we have a UPI, but the US is still on an ACH decades old sort of system. So all of those aspects is really important, and it's driven our Indian founders to really innovate compared to most other regions that I've seen. So that is, one important point.
I think that's a brilliant point, and I do sort of agree in bit parts. And what I also find here is, sometimes that you spoke about a little bit earlier, this copy paste mentality is a certain percentage of the ecosystem is still doing that. So my wish for the ecosystem is that we actually sort of got away with all of that and started looking at small little pain points in our own close-knit communities, in our own neighborhoods, in our mohallas, in our gullies, in our little towns, and then slowly sort of expand it out and go outward, panning outward, But no, absolutely valid point. inherently we are the makers of zero. We made zero, and we've had the likes of Nalandas and the Takshilas even before people heard about any sort of education and all of that. So I'm totally with you, my
Yeah,
friend, when you say that Indians as a race we are pretty innovative. So absolutely spot on. Thank you for that.
yeah.
Any regrets
Any regrets from my
in your
side?
journey, professional, personal, anything, uh, it's not necessary that you have to have regrets, but you never know. Life is all
Sure.
about ups and downs and things. So yeah, if at all, any.
Yeah. Regrets, I think as an investor, there are sort of opportunities that you wish you would have invested in, I guess. I wish I would have had as much conviction and I was able to convey that conviction to other people that, that I could invest in those companies. I think no regrets as such, but I just wish I could have invested in those companies where I had that level of conviction in a sense. In terms of regrets, I don't think I have any. Obviously, I wanted to become a founder, but I never became one. I wanted to be an entrepreneur that way, right? But I also do realize that I probably didn't do that because I don't have the competencies to be able to do something like that, right? And each one has their own competencies, and you play to what you're strongest at, right? So I think at least I'm building that competency, at least in venture capital and investing. So I hope to be able to do something well out of it.
Oh, absolutely, you will. I have absolutely no doubt about that. So, yeah, so far so good. Thank you so much, which brings us to the end of a very, well, I wouldn't say serious, but a business sort of a conversation. Now the fun part starts. Osborne, are you ready?
Not so
And
much, but sure.
well, that's okay, because see, at the end of it, you're trying to draw out the human from behind this alien VC sort of person that is perceived to be. So I'm taking you slowly down a rapid fire question round. And the first rule of this and the only rule of this round is that whatever comes to your mind first is the answer. There is nothing right, nothing wrong. If you can't think of something, just say pass. But not more than one passes are allowed as well, please. So you remember that. Are you ready?
Let's do this.
As ready as you could be. All right, then, Oswald. What is your favorite thing about someone in your family?
Ah, that they are very patient and hardworking.
Okay, fair enough. Excellent. Family person, if you're listening to this or when you will be listening to this later, please go and give Osborne a big tight hug, okay? So thank you for that. What is one of your weird quirks, Osborne?
My weird quirks is to just get lost in thoughts, I think. I very often do that where, I mean, unfortunately, even while speaking to people, I'm always lost in how this can be done, how that can be done, and trying to, draw a whole network of things. So I'm usually just doing that.
Okay, fair enough. Describe yourself in 3 words, please.
Patient, uh, good listener, and
Mhm.
hardworking, I guess.
Very well done. Thank you very much. If you could trade lives with anyone for a day, who would that be and why would that be?
Interesting. Uh, my first thought was Elon Musk actually, but that was
Oh,
more because he's really solving some really interesting. But I don't want to sound like an Elon Musk fan or anything like that. So, yeah. Anyway, I think I'll pass on that.
okay, fair enough. If you could talk in your sleep, what would you say?
I would be talking about fintech most likely.
Okay, fair enough. What is the first thing you do when you get up in the morning, Osman?
I drink a bottle of water.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank the Lord for that. I was hoping it will not be I pick up my phone and check my emails. That is. But thank you for that. Having a bottle of
Yeah.
water is absolutely brilliant. Yeah. What would you do
Yeah.
on Mars for fun?
On Mars.
What would you do
Wow.
there
I've
for fun?
actually never thought of that, but I've I'd just be jumping around from place to place, I think. I mean, the
Okay.
whole, lower gravity thing would be very interesting for me.
Brilliant. If you could get yourself anything, what would you get?
If I could,
If you could get yourself anything, buy anything for yourself, what would that be?
wow, I think I would get myself a lounging chair, actually.
Okay.
But
That
yeah, I
reminds
mean,
you of the beaches of Goa, does it?
no, no, no. It's just that I primarily have my work chair and I need to also relax at some point of time. But I don't do
Uh-huh.
that often enough. So I think that's also interesting.
So, my dear friend, an ergonomic chair is the order next, yeah? Um,
Yes.
yeah. Where is the worst place you could get stuck, Osborne?
The worst place I could get stuck,
Mm-hmm.
Andheri station in Mumbai.
Oh my God, yes, I agree with you there.
It's the
What would you do
worst
with
place
your...
to get stuck.
Absolutely spot on. Yep. So many people and so much of chaos, and oh my God, yeah. What would you do with your 15 minutes of fame, Osborne?
I would want more regulation for women in fintech, actually.
Okay.
I mean, I would proclaim or want to be able to talk more about that aspect of it.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you for that. That talks about gender and inclusion and equity. So, absolutely great. And my last question is before I pick up an audience question, which has just popped up. And the last question is, where would you go, Osborne, if you were invisible like Harry Potter was?
I would go to the Himachal Pradesh actually
Yeah?
and just get lost over there. There's just so many beautiful places that I would just not want to be seen by anyone, but still want to be there.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Amazing. That really sort of made you think and sort of reflect back in terms of, Mars. What are you going to do in Mars and what would you buy for yourself and stuff?
Yes.
Let me pull up this audience question which has popped up. I know we are on a VC spotlight, but then because you're from Xiaomi, obviously the question is about one of the products and it is right here. It is from Rohan. Does Xiaomi have a plan to make manufacturing plant in other B class or C class cities of India or invest in these cities in 21 and after?
So, I mean, I'm not the best person to respond to something like that. This is on the business team's side. I
Absolutely.
primarily look at investments. So, yeah, I'm not the right person to answer something like this.
I'm sure Rohan will understand and he will anyway reach out to anyone in the business side on LinkedIn. But that brings me to an end of this conversation. And before we actually say our byes to the audience today, Oswin, is there something that you would like to say to the audience or to the stakeholders of the ecosystem as such in terms of what not to do as a startup founder, as a core team member, as say a studentpreneur, or as anybody that's looking at starting and scaling up? What not to do in your views and thoughts? Over to you. Thank you.
This is definitely one of the more interesting conversations I've been asked anywhere. So thanks for that. In terms of what not to do, maybe for founders, I would say that don't build your startup or your business with your VC in mind, or don't try to build it keeping in mind how much you want to raise and things like that. Will this appeal to an investor? Will it not appeal to an investor? Things like that. You're not building for the investor really, you're building for your consumer. And as long as your consumer likes it, your consumer is paying for it, or your consumer is using it on a daily basis, that's what should matter most, really. Not whether an investor is, sort of looking at it or not. And this also ties into what I said a little while ago that if you are building a really strong business, if you are showing good traction, all of that stuff, you will get noticed. There's no chance that you will not get noticed, right? Hard work always gets noticed in a sense, even if you're not in the spotlight at all points in time. So that's for founders. For peers in the VC industry, I guess it's changing now, but I think what I want to more focus on is that peers or VCs should not ghost other founders. If a founder is reaching out to you in a sense, do reply to that founder. If you are declining the business, do mention that you are declining the business and why you are declining the business. But yeah, founders really need to know, or at least deserve that least aspect of it, as to what really didn't really go well with that particular business in a sense. So for peers in the industry, it's to at least reply to the founder and don't ghost them in a sense.
I think you're spot on because this is something which is sort of becoming more and more, how shall I say, prevalent in today's day and age, wherein people just do not sort of write back or call back or message back or something, which is, and then that leaves the other person hanging, Osborne. So I totally sort of get it because I think both you and I would at some point in time have been on the receiving end of this as well. And then we know how irritating it
For
is,
sure.
how sort of you're in the limbo, you're thinking, oh my god, what did I do wrong, am I sort of incompetent, what is wrong with me, kind of that whole spiraling down scenario. So I think it's a brilliant takeaway that you have said, so thank you very much for that. With that, dear audience and dear peers, students, and everybody else that is logged in today, we are at the end of our conversation. I would first of all like to say a big thanks to the audience for tuning in, because if you were not here, then Osborne and I will not be sitting here talking to anybody or just us, So thank you for that. Thank you to Echo Events for streaming this. Last but not the least, my dear friend Osborne, thank you for saying yes and coming out and talking to me and giving these insights to the ecosystem in general. I've had a lot of fun. I've got to know a little bit of quirky and other side of you, and I intend to carry these conversations on in time and come and say a big hi to you when I'm in Bangalore at the office. So with that, this is Osborne and Preeti saying our bye. Stay indoors, stay safe until the next time. Do take good care and all the best to everybody today. Take care. Thank you.